This is the least expensive way to convert your traditional circular saw, whether corded or cordless, into a chainsaw that can cut through all kinds of stuff. Like it says here, beams, posts, rafters, stairs, arches, panels, railroad ties, and logs. I'm going to put this to the test and show you if it's a good value or if you should skip it altogether. I bought this kit from Harbor Freight to give it a try, and the answer is not what I expected. First, let's talk about compatibility. According to the website, this securely mounts to both conventional and worm drive saws from the Harbor Freight brands, as well as Skil, Bosch, DeWalt, Rigid, Milwaukee, Ryobi, Craftsman, Hitachi, Porter Cable, Makita, and Black & Decker. Well, as it just so happens, I have circular saws from Rigid, DeWalt, Milwaukee, Skil, and Flex. So, I tested out these claims. The assembly setup is a bit of a pain, to be honest. But I kept at it, and eventually I kind of got a fit on my Rigid cordless circular saw, but not really. It's not a good fit, so the bar doesn't actually sit at 90 degrees like it's supposed to. The whole thing just kind of seems sketchy, and it's clear that this really is not a compatible fit. Okay, so let's move on to the Milwaukee worm drive. I purchased this saw pretty recently, so I'm pretty excited to see if we can make this work. After finagling with it for about 20 minutes, I realized that they didn't include a compatible arbor screw. Of the 5 arbor screws included with the kit, none of them was compatible with this Milwaukee saw. So that means we're 0 for 2 at this point. Next up, I decided to try my corded Skil saw, and dun-da-da-da, it works. I did have to adjust the arbor bolt a couple of times to get it centered so that it wouldn't shake itself to pieces, but it eventually got there. Another issue I noticed with all of these is that getting the right spacing between the saw's arbor hole and the attachment never seemed to work. I felt like the arbor saw was either a bit too far or too close, which is definitely going to affect the angle it cuts at. This arbor sleeve bushing was included in the kit, and it never seems to fit. In fact, I never got to use this at all. I'm not quite sure what the point of this one is. I figured after attempting to connect this beast to 3 different saws, though, it was finally time to see this thing in action. I started with a 6x6 beam as my initial test cut. Now, as you can see, it handles it pretty smoothly and seems to work without any issues. Now, keep in mind, this saw is an older, cheap saw that runs at 12 amps, so it's not as powerful as some of my new cordless saws. The cuts themselves were pretty clean, and it had no power issues getting through these cuts. From there, I moved to an 8x10, and once again, it handled pretty smoothly. This one was slower than the first, as expected, but no big deal. At this point, I wanted to check the angle of the cuts to see how square the cut was, and it was definitely a few degrees off. So I tried another cut just to make sure that that wasn't user error. Nope, it's definitely a bit off, and that's almost certainly due to the fact that it was mounted a bit too far away from the arbor hole. There are really 2 options to address this. The first is to add a large washer or 2 during the assembly process in order to dial in that distance. The other option is to simply adjust the angle of the plate until you have it square. Then you've got to bear in mind that discrepancy for any angled cuts you need to make, like 45s, for example. Not a big deal, but definitely something to be aware of. This is a good time to mention that it looks like this kit is really designed to handle 90-degree angles only. Next up, I decided to put this thing to the test using this full-size 11 3/8 by 11 3/8 beam. It should be able to handle this just fine since it claims to have a 12-inch depth. Well, that just isn't the case. As you can see, the blade doesn't make it all the way through, and upon further inspection, this only makes it to about 11 inches. So I had to turn the beam on its side to get through it. Not the end of the world, but it's something that you need to keep in mind. With this particular saw, I couldn't get anywhere near the 12 inches that it claims. Okay, so at this point, we're 1 for 3 on compatibility, and we had a few kinks so far as well. I realized that my DeWalt saw is actually a 6.5-inch circular saw, so that's not going to be compatible at all. So last up, I really wanted to try my Flex 7.25-inch saw since this thing is a powerhouse. If this fits, then this would be the saw I'd most likely use with the beam cutter. While I'm attempting assembly here, I thought I'd point out that this beam cutter is not meant to do the same things as a traditional chainsaw. A chainsaw obviously has a different orientation with the handle. The bar points straight out away from you, where a beam cutter shoots straight down from the base plate of the circular saw. That may seem like an issue, but that's actually a beam cutter's greatest strength. It's meant to be used with a wide base plate like what you find on a circular saw, so that it can provide a pretty straight and flat cut at the angle you need. That plate is able to ride along a flat beam surface to provide a more accurate cut than a chainsaw could. The whole point of a beam cutter is to be able to cut thicker beams and boards that already have a flat side and do so in one pass, which a traditional circular saw just can't do. Instead of making a circular saw cut all the way around a beam like this, the beam cutter does it in one pass, and there are no alignment issues afterward either. Plus, for thicker pieces, you'd have to make 4 cuts and then hand saw the rest. see, this is going to the... My goodness. Yeah! Woo! What a job. That took way too long and too many calories. I need brownies. And to boot, it's kind of a crappy cut. This was misaligned down here. So that's an issue. And then, of course, this one is as well. So, and way too much work. So I basically had to cut about a 3.5 inch by 6 inch block out of the middle of this through the grooves. What a pain. A beam cutter also includes the guide bar always following behind in order to help get a straight cut and avoid kickback. It's not designed to go out into the woods and cut trees down. A chainsaw is ideal for that. But if you do need to cut a cookie, a beam, a railroad tie, or any thicker boards with at least one flat side, however, this is your guy. I also found that it worked really well for helping to quickly trim my wood turning blanks, like this bowl blank here, for example. If you have a large enough bandsaw, that could work as well for this too, but the beam cutter is invaluable if you have to work with larger, longer beams that simply won't fit onto your miter saw station and are too thick to cut with a circular saw. As you can see here, this was actually a perfect fit with the Flex 7.5 inch circular saw. Not only could I cut through the 6 inch and then the 8x10, but the 12 inch one was a piece of cake for this thing. It cut pretty smoothly, it cut accurately, and check out the angle on this one. This thing is a perfect 90 degrees. No issues, no deviance whatsoever. If you're looking for a chainsaw replacement, this isn't it. This is meant for cutting beams and other flat surfaces, and it does a great job at that. The thing is, you've got to be aware of compatibility. So what I'm going to do to try to help with this is in the review section on the Harbor Freight website for this beam cutter, I'm going to leave all of the compatible saws that I've tried and the incompatible ones as well. If you did the same, we can help other people who are considering getting one of these see if it's a compatible fit with their circular saws. While I don't work with beams every day by any stretch, I do work with them sometimes, especially when I'm building structures and things like that, and I think this would make it so much easier to just get right through the cut without having to do multiple cuts and then hand sawing and everything like that. So I'm definitely going to be hanging on to the beam cutter for those purposes. I'll put links in the description below for you to check this one out at Harbor Freight, or you can just head to your local Harbor Freight if you have one. There are also other brands that make these, and there are some pretty good ones like Prodsy and others, but they tend to cost quite a bit more. This was by far the least expensive one that I found. Hopefully you found this helpful. My name is Nils with Learn to DIY. Thanks for watching.